Picture this. The chariot is parked right in the middle of two massive, just completely roaring armies.
Oh yeah, the noise alone would be overwhelming.
Right, you have the deafening sound of conch shells, drums, the stamping of thousands of war horses, and there, right in the center of it all, is Arjuna.
The absolute apex warrior of his era.
Exactly. I mean, this is a man who has spent his entire life training for this exact moment, but instead of drawing his bow, the text describes this complete, catastrophic, physiological and psychological collapse.
It's really visceral the way it's described.
It really is. His skin is burning, his mouth is completely dry, he's trembling so violently that his legendary bow, the Gandiva, literally slips out of his hands.
He just completely shuts down.
He slumps down on the chariot and tells his charioteer, Krishna, that he simply cannot fight. And the response he gets isn't comfort.
No, not at all.
It isn't, a hand on the shoulder. It's basically a psychological slap in the face. Krishna looks at this broken man and tells him his grief is an impurity, a petty weakness of the heart.
And, frankly, unmanly. That's the word used.
Yeah. Before we unpack that intense moment, I want to welcome everyone listening. If you're enjoying our content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and definitely share your reflections in the comments below as we go.
We really love reading your thoughts down there.
Absolutely. So welcome to this deep dive into Chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, known as Sankhya Yoga. And today we're looking at this through the profoundly rigorous commentary of the 8th century philosopher Adi Shankaracharya.
Which is such a fascinating lens to use.
It is. Now, we are bypassing the basic plot summaries today. If you're listening to this, you likely already know the stakes of the Mahabharata. You know who the Pandavas and the Kauravas are.
Right. Chapter 1 was all narrative, just setting the stage.
Exactly. Chapter 2 is where the true philosophical core of the Gita actually begins. What we are doing today is looking under the hood of this ancient text to understand the exact mechanics of human suffering and, well, liberation.
And we're doing that specifically through Advaita Vedanta, which is the philosophy of non-duality.
Right. And that specific lens is what elevates this from just, a mythological battlefield pep talk into a real epistemological masterclass.
Oh, 100%. Because Shankaracharya's entire thesis rests on a very specific diagnosis of the human condition.
Which is what? Exactly.
He posits that all human suffering, without exception, is born of ignorance.
Yep.
The Sanskrit word is avidya.
Avidya.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because the disease is ignorance, the only cure is knowledge. But not like accumulating facts from a textbook.
Right, it's not trivia.
No, it's a radical shift in recognizing the ultimate nature of reality and the self.
So let's start right there at the symptom of the disease, which is Arjuna's grief. Because, when you read Arjuna's arguments in the first chapter and the opening of the second, it is incredibly difficult not to side with him.
It really is. He makes a very compelling emotional case.
He looks across the front lines and he sees his grandfather, Bhishma. He sees his beloved martial arts instructor, Drona, and he tells Krishna, I don't care about the kingdom.
Right. He says he'd rather be a beggar.
Exactly. He says he would rather live on the streets as a beggar than eat food that is drenched in the blood of his own family. It sounds intensely moral.
It sounds like a man waking up to the horrors of war.
Yeah. So why does Krishna, who is the voice of the divine here, why does he treat this compassion like a disease?
Because, well, according to Shankaracharya, it isn't true compassion.
Wait, really? What is it then?
It is ego masquerading as compassion.
Oh, wow. Okay, unpack that for me.
To understand why Krishna is so harsh, we have to look at the exact mechanics of what is happening in Arjuna's mind. His breakdown is rooted in two specific illusions.
Which are?
Ahamta, which is the sense of I-ness, and mamata, the sense of my-ness.
I-ness and my-ness. Got it.
Right. When Arjuna looks across the battlefield, he doesn't just see human beings. He sees my grandfather, my teacher, my cousins.
Ah, I see where this is going.
And he thinks, I am going to kill them. I am going to be the destroyer of my family line. I will carry this in.
But hold on, physically speaking, he is going to kill them, right? Like, he is the one firing the arrows. How is acknowledging the physical reality of cause and effect an illusion?
It's an illusion of ultimate agency and ultimate identification. Shankaracharya uses a concept called atyasa.
Atyasa. What does that translate to?
It translates to superimposition. We superimpose the attributes of one thing onto another.
Give me an example of that.
The classic Advaita example is, imagine walking in the dark and you see a piece of rope on the ground, but you mistake it for a venomous snake.
Okay, yeah, I definitely panic.
Right. Your biological reaction is entirely real. Your heart rate spikes, cortisol floods your system, you jump back in terror. You are suffering genuinely.
But the snake isn't real.
Exactly. The cause of the suffering is a superimposition. You have superimposed the qualities of a snake onto a rope.
So in this context, Arjuna is basically hallucinating a snake on the battlefield.
That's a great way to put it. Arjuna is superimposing the temporary fleeting roles of the physical body, like the titles of grandfather or cousin, onto the eternal, indestructible self.
Oh, I see. So he's confusing the costume with the actor inside it.
Precisely. And because he thinks the costume is the absolute reality, he believes that by destroying the costume, he is destroying the actual essence of the person.
Which makes his grief feel like an absolute ultimate tragedy.
Yes, but his grief isn't born of supreme moral clarity. It's born of supreme cosmic ignorance. He thinks he has the ultimate power to create and destroy life.
Which is, I guess, the ultimate arrogance of the ego when you really think about it.
Exactly. It's profound arrogance disguised as pity.
Wow. That reframes Krishna's rebuke entirely for me. Like when Krishna says, cast off this petty weakness of the heart, he isn't being, a toxic military general telling a soldier to just man up.
No, not at all.
He's acting more like a surgeon snapping a hysterical patient out of a delusion. If a patient is screaming in terror because they think a shadow in the room is a demon, the surgeon doesn't sit down and validate the demon.
Right. The surgeon turns on the lights.
Exactly. He turns on the lights.
Krishna has to break that psychological spiral. Arjuna is caught in this feedback loop of his own egoic projections.
And until that ego is punctured, I imagine no higher philosophical teaching can even enter his mind.
Exactly.
Wow.
This is why Arjuna's formal surrender is the necessary catalyst here. He finally stops arguing his moral superiority, slumps down, and says, "My mind is bewildered about duty. I am your disciple. Instruct me."
He finally empties his cup.
Yes. Only when the cup is emptied of its own assumed wisdom can it be filled with actual knowledge.
And the knowledge Krishna pours in is just a complete paradigm shift. He immediately pivots away from the tactical reality of the mud and the chariots and forces Arjuna to look at the physics of consciousness itself.
It's a huge zoom-out moment.
It really is. Krishna lays down his opening thesis, and it's honestly one of the most famous philosophical flexes in literature. He says, "You grieve for those who are not to be grieved for. The learned do not grieve for the departed or those who have not departed."
Right. It's a thesis statement that immediately establishes the Sankhya perspective.
And just to be clear for our audience, when Shankaracharya uses the word Sankhya here, he is not referring to the dualistic Kapila Sankhya philosophical school.
That's the clarification. No, in this context, Sankhya simply means the ultimate knowledge of reality. It's the discrimination between what is eternal and what is transient.
So let's dissect this eternal reality, the Atman, because the text spends a lot of time defining it by what it is not.
Yeah, the via negativa approach.
Right. Krishna explains that the self is unborn, eternal, undecaying, and indestructible. He gives it these elemental immunities. He says weapons cannot cut it, fire cannot burn it, water cannot moisten it, wind cannot dry it.
The mechanics of this are so crucial to understand Shankaracharya's non-dualism. In Advaita Vedanta, for something to be considered real with a capital R, it must remain unchanged in all three periods of time.
Past, present, and future.
Exactly. If a thing comes into existence, changes, and then goes out of existence, it is considered transient or just an appearance.
So it has a relative reality, but not an absolute reality.
Right.
Like a dream, maybe. The dream feels incredibly real while you're in it, but upon waking, you realize it had no independent, permanent existence.
Yes, that's a perfect analogy. Or consider the physical body itself. Shankaracharya points out that all material things are subject to 6 modifications.
Oh, the Shanbhakar.
Right, the Shadvikara. These are birth, existence, growth, transformation, decay, and death.
And every single atom in the physical universe is trapped in that cycle.
Every single one.
Yeah.
But consciousness itself, the observing awareness, the Atman, is not subject to these modifications.
Doesn't grow or age.
It doesn't. Think about it. The awareness you had as a 5-year-old child observing a butterfly is the exact same fundamental awareness you have as an 80-year-old observing a sunset.
Wow, that's really striking.
The body has decayed, sure, and the intellect has accumulated a ton of data, but the pure light of the observer hasn't aged a single second.
I love that. But I want to push back on this heavily, actually, because this is where philosophical theory slams into the brutal reality of human experience.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah, the Gita uses that famous analogy of changing clothes. It says, just as a person discards worn-out clothes and puts on new ones, the embodied soul discards worn-out bodies and enters into new ones.
Yes, very famous verse.
But when you apply that to a battlefield or, to a modern hospital room where someone is losing a child or a spouse, calling a dying loved one discarded clothes borders on sociopathic.
It sounds incredibly harsh to our modern ears.
It does. How does Shankara defend that level of extreme detachment? Are we just supposed to intellectually bypass our humanity?
It is the most common, and frankly the most valid resistance to Advaita philosophy. But Shankara doesn't defend it as a coping mechanism. He frames it as an ontological reality.
Okay, explain what you mean by that.
To understand this, we really have to separate apathy from detachment. They are not the same thing.
What's the difference?
Apathy is a state of numbness where you simply don't care about the suffering of others. You're disconnected. Detachment, in the Vedantic sense, is the profound clarity of seeing things exactly as they are.
Can you clarify that in real time? Like, if you and I are standing over a dying relative, how does the Vedantic detachment look different from just being cold and apathetic?
An apathetic person feels nothing because they have completely closed their heart. A realized person, on the other hand, feels immense compassion, but they are not fundamentally shattered.
Because they aren't hallucinating the snake.
Exactly. They are not making a category error. Let's look at the analogy of an actor on a stage. Imagine watching a brilliant actor play Hamlet.
Okay, I'm with you.
At the end of the play, Hamlet dies. You might cry because the performance is beautiful and the narrative is undeniably tragic.
But you don't jump up and call an ambulance.
Why not? Because you hold a simultaneous awareness that the actor underneath the costume is perfectly fine. Your grief is aesthetic, it's not existential.
That is such a powerful distinction. The knowledge of the actor's true identity provides a sort of container for the emotional experience of the play.
Exactly. Shankaracharya isn't telling you to stop crying when your loved one dies. He is telling you to fundamentally relocate the identity of the person you loved.
Which completely changes the nature of the grief.
It does. If you believe your spouse is their physical body, then their death is the absolute annihilation of their existence. That is a grief that destroys you.
But if your operating system is Sankhya,
Right. If you know that the core of their being and your being is the indestructible Atman, then the grief is just a natural mourning for the loss of proximity. It's the loss of the costume.
but it isn't an existential annihilation.
No, it isn't. And this directly ties into how Krishna tells Arjuna to handle the Dvandvas.
The dualities of life, right? Like heat and cold, pleasure and pain.
Yes. He talks about titiksha, which translates to endurance or forbearance. He says we have to endure the contacts of the senses with their objects, because these experiences come and go. They are impermanent.
Plus, the Sanskrit phrase there is agama payina, right? Meaning that which has a beginning and an end.
Exactly. Because pleasure and pain have a beginning and an end, they strictly belong to the realm of the transient.
While the Atman is just the unchanging witness of these changing states.
Yes, think of the thermometer. It measures the boiling water and the freezing water. But the thermometer itself doesn't become the water.
Oh, that's good.
The enlightened mind observes the pain of the body or the sorrow of the mind, but it never fuses its ultimate identity with that pain.
Okay, but this introduces a massive paradox for me.
Let's hear it. If I am the eternal, indestructible Atman, if nothing can actually be killed or destroyed, if the bodies are just costumes, then why do anything at all? Ah, the classic Arjuna dilemma.
Right. If I'm playing a video game and I realize none of the pixels are real, I usually just put the controller down and walk away. Why doesn't Arjuna just drop his weapons, walk into the forest, and meditate?
It's the most logical next question.
If the highest reality is actionless, why is Krishna demanding that Arjuna participate in a gruesome, violent war?
That paradox is literally the engine that drives the entire rest of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna asks variations of that exact question repeatedly.
Because it's so counterintuitive.
It is. If knowledge of the eternal is the goal, why demand action? And this brings us to the profound paradigm shift of Chapter 2, the introduction of Karma Yoga.
Right. Krishna pivots from Sankhya, which is the pure knowledge of reality, to yoga, the discipline of action in the material world.
He tells Arjuna he must fight, but he completely re-engineers why and how he must fight.
And Shankaracharya is very precise here about why running to the forest won't work.
He is. He explains that total renunciation of action is the ultimate state of a fully realized master. But for a person whose mind is still agitated by desires, fears, and ego.
A person like Arjuna.
And like most of us, honestly, for us, sudden physical renunciation is a complete disaster.
Because you take your mind with you.
Exactly. If Arjuna walks into the forest to meditate, his body might be sitting peacefully in a cave, but his mind will be raging with guilt about the war, anger at his cousins, and fear of failure.
He won't be meditating at all, he'll just be obsessing.
So action is biologically and psychologically unavoidable. Even breathing is an action.
So the question isn't whether to act or not act.
No. The question is how to act in a way that liberates you rather than binds you. And here, Krishna lays out the golden rule of Karma Yoga. It is arguably the most famous verse in the entire text.
You have the right to the action alone, never to its fruits.
Yes. You must perform your duty with absolute dedication, but you must completely sever your attachment to the outcome.
Whether that outcome is victory, defeat, praise, blame, profit, or loss.
Shankaracharya calls this Nishkama Karma, which means desireless action.
Let's linger on that for a second because it is the ultimate psychological life hack, but it completely contradicts modern conditioning.
Oh, it goes against everything we are taught.
It really does. Modern society operates entirely on outcome-based motivation. We go to school to get a degree, we work to get a promotion.
The fruit is the entire reason we plant the tree in the first place.
Exactly. If we look at the mechanics of human ambition, the desire for the outcome is the fuel. Like if you are a surgeon operating on a patient, the desire for the patient to survive is what keeps your hands steady during a 14-hour procedure.
That's the assumption, yes.
Or if you're an entrepreneur, the desire for the company to succeed is what pushes you to work weekends. If you genuinely detach from the outcome, if you truly say, you know, I don't care if the patient lives or dies, or I don't care if the business goes bankrupt.
You're worried you'll just become mediocre.
Yeah. How do you separate the drive for excellence from the attachment to the result? It seems impossible.
It's a brilliant question. And to answer it, we actually have to look at the neuroscience of performance, which perfectly validates Shankaracharya's commentary from 1,200 years ago.
Okay, I love when ancient text meets modern science. Break that down for me.
Well, you assume that desire for the outcome is the best fuel for excellence. In reality, desire for the outcome is a massive cognitive tax.
A cognitive tax. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Where does outcome exist? The outcome, the success, or the failure exists entirely in the future. It hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Therefore, when your mind is fixated on the fruit of the action, your attention is literally time traveling. You are splitting your cognitive bandwidth.
Oh, I see.
Part of your brain is engaged in the task in front of you, but a massive portion of your brain is simulating future scenarios. What if I fail? What if the critics hate this? What if I run out of money?
And that constant simulation is basically the biological definition of anxiety.
Precisely. Anxiety is an outcome-dependent emotion. It spikes your cortisol, it narrows your peripheral vision, and it creates literal physical tension in your body.
So a surgeon who is terrified of a malpractice lawsuit isn't actually operating at peak efficiency.
Not at all. They are operating under a severe cognitive handicap. Now, let's look at the state of Nishkama Karma, action without attachment.
What happens in the brain there?
When you sever the mental link to the future outcome, 100% of your cognitive bandwidth collapses into the present moment. Your attention is entirely consumed by the action itself.
Which is exactly what the psychologist Csikszentmihalyi called flow state.
Yes. Flow state is characterized by transient hypofrontality.
That's a big term.
It just means the temporary deactivation of the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for self-monitoring, ego, and worrying about the future.
Wow.
In a flow state, the ego basically vanishes. The anxiety about the outcome vanishes. There's only the brushstroke. There's only the code being written. There's only the arrow being drawn.
So the paradox of karma yoga is that by letting go of your demand for a specific outcome, your action becomes flawlessly executed.
Which, ironically, makes a successful outcome more likely.
That completely flips the script. We think caring about the outcome makes us better, but it actually introduces friction.
Exactly. Outcome independence is the ultimate performance enhancer.
Because you aren't playing to win, and you aren't playing not to lose. You are just completely dissolved in the joy and the rigor of the play itself.
And for Shankaracharya, the goal of this isn't just to make you a better, more productive worker. The goal is spiritual purification.
Titashudi.
Yes,
Yeah.
the purification of the internal organ, the mind. Every time you act out of selfish desire, you reinforce the ego. You reinforce the illusion of I am the doer and I must extract pleasure from the universe.
But every time you act out of pure duty.
You are effectively sanding down the ego. You are starving the false self. And this purified, calm mind is the absolute prerequisite for receiving the ultimate knowledge of the Atman.
Okay, so that is the ideal. We use karma yoga to sever our attachment to outcomes, which collapses us into the present moment, purifies our mind, and prepares us for the realization of the eternal self.
That's the path.
Let's look at the failure state. What happens when we don't do this? Because our default setting as human beings is to be intensely attached to outcomes and deeply obsessed with sensory objects.
The Gita doesn't just offer the solution. It provides a devastatingly precise psychological map of the problem.
It outlines a specific sequence of psychological breakdown, right? The ladder of the fall.
Yes. It describes exactly what happens when we let our attention adhere to the material world.
And what blows my mind about this ladder is how perfectly it maps onto modern behavioral psychology and addiction mechanics.
It's incredibly relevant today. Let's walk through it step by step.
Let's do it. It starts with the Sanskrit verse, Dhyato Vishayan Pumsa.
Which begins with simply contemplating or thinking about sense objects.
Right. It starts innocuously. You aren't taking action. You are just letting your attention dwell on an object of the senses.
It could be a physical object, a status, or a specific life outcome. You were just thinking about it.
But the text says that continuous contemplation breeds sangha, which is attachment or association.
Mechanically, what's happening is that your mind is beginning to build an identity around that object. You are no longer just observing it.
You're investing it with the promise of your own happiness.
Exactly. You are superimposing the idea of joy onto a dead object.
And from that attachment, kama is born. Intense desire or craving. You cross the line from, oh, that's nice, to, I must have that to be complete.
This is dopamine in the brain.
Yeah, the brain creates a prediction model that acquiring this object will yield a massive dopamine reward, creating a biological craving.
But here is where the trap snaps shut. The next rung on the ladder isn't satisfaction. The text asks, what happens when that intense burning desire is obstructed?
Because the world always pushes back eventually.
Exactly. What happens when you can't get what you want?
Krodha is born. Anger.
Anger is simply thwarted desire. If you trace any anger you feel back to its source, you'll always find an obstructed desire.
Wow.
You wanted respect, and someone insulted you. You wanted wealth, and you lost a client. The intensity of the anger is directly proportional to the intensity of the attachment.
And neurochemically, anger shuts down the prefrontal cortex, which leads perfectly to the next rung on the Gita's ladder, samoha, or delusion.
The text says, from anger comes delusion.
Delusion here means the loss of proportion, right? Your cognitive framing becomes entirely distorted.
Yes. The object you desire becomes the only thing that matters in the universe, and the obstacle in your way becomes an absolute enemy. You lose your objectivity completely.
Which triggers smriti-bhramsha, the loss of memory.
And this doesn't mean you forget your name or your address.
Right, it's not literal amnesia.
No. It means you forget your deeper values. You forget your philosophical training. You forget the lessons of your past mistakes. The anger and delusion have created a localized amnesia regarding your own moral compass.
And that leads to the penultimate step, buddhinasha, the destruction of the intellect, or discrimination.
The intellect, the buddhi, is the highest faculty of the human mind. It is the ability to discern right from wrong, eternal from temporary, helpful from harmful.
And when memory fails, the intellect is destroyed. The pilot has left the cockpit.
And the final step is prasyati, ultimate ruin. The person perishes.
Let's map this entire ladder to a modern scenario because it is terrifyingly applicable to something as mundane as smartphone addiction or doom scrolling.
Please walk us through that modern mapping.
Okay, let's say you're sitting on your couch, completely at peace. You pick up your phone and open a social media app. You see a targeted ad or an influencer's post about an incredibly luxurious vacation in the Maldives.
Okay, step one, contemplating the sense object.
Right. You linger on the photo, you swipe through the carousel. Step two, attachment. You start imagining yourself there. You associate the image with relaxation, happiness, and status.
The superimposition begins.
Exactly. Step three, desire. The dopamine production error kicks in. Your brain says, my current life on this couch is inadequate. I need that vacation to be happy.
The craving is locked in.
Then, step four, obstruction and anger. You check your bank account, you can't afford it. Or you look at your calendar and you have no time off. The desire is thwarted.
And suddenly, the peace you had 10 minutes ago is totally gone.
You feel a spike of resentment. You are angry at your boss, angry at your salary, maybe angry at your partner for not earning more.
Step 5. Delusion.
Right. Your cognitive framing warps. You convince yourself that life is fundamentally unfair, that everyone else is succeeding while you are failing.
Step 6. Loss of memory.
You forget that just last week you had a profound conversation about gratitude. You forget the actual joy of the life you have built. You lose access to your own wisdom.
Step 7. Destruction of intellect.
Because your discrimination is gone, you make a terrible decision. You put the $10,000 vacation on a high-interest credit card you can't pay off, or you pick a bitter fight with your spouse over money, causing deep relational damage.
And finally, step 8. Ruin. Your financial peace or your relational harmony is destroyed.
And it all started because you let your attention dwell on an external object, superimposing your happiness onto it.
That is an absolutely flawless application of Shankaracharya's commentary. Ignorance, avidya, is the soil in which that entire poisonous tree grows.
The ignorance is the belief that the Maldives vacation contains inherent joy.
It doesn't. If a person with severe food poisoning goes to the Maldives, they will be miserable. The joy comes from within, but we project it outward onto objects, and then we chase the objects.
Initiating that exact ladder of destruction. So how do we stop the fall? If human biology is wired to crave dopamine and project happiness onto external things, how do we intervene?
You have to cut the root.
Mm-hmm.
And the root is the very first step where you place your attention. The Gita insists on the rigorous control of the senses. You must withdraw the mind from obsessing over the external world and redirect it inward toward the eternal self.
This naturally leads to Arjuna's next major question. He is listening to this massive download of philosophy about eternal souls, flow state action, and avoiding the ladder of psychological ruin. And he asks for a behavioral model.
This is a very practical pivot.
He essentially asks, what does a person who has mastered all of this actually look like? The Sanskrit term he uses is Stitaprajna, a person of steady wisdom.
Right. He asks Krishna, how does the Stitaprajna speak?
Yeah.
How does he sit? How does he move?
It's the ultimate pragmatist's question. Arjuna wants to know if this is just theoretical poetry or if it changes the way a human being actually interacts with gravity.
And Krishna responds by defining the core architecture of an enlightened mind. He says that the Stitaprajna is someone who has completely cast out all desires of the mind and is satisfied in the self by the self.
Satisfied in the self by the self. Atmanyeva atmana tushta.
That phrase is the absolute bedrock of Advaita Vedanta. Their contentment is entirely self-generated and self-sustained.
It has zero external dependencies.
Exactly. They don't need a specific person to love them, a specific bank balance to secure them, or a specific environment to comfort them. Because they have realized their identity as the infinite Atman, they possess the fullness of existence.
And because they have zero external dependencies, their reaction to the world completely changes. Krishna says this person is unperturbed in sorrow and free from the craving for pleasure.
They are devoid of attachment, fear, and anger.
But what I find most fascinating is the analogy Krishna uses to describe how this person operates in the physical world. He doesn't say the enlightened person vanishes into a cave. He compares them to a tortoise.
The tortoise analogy is brilliant.
He says, when, like a tortoise drawing in its limbs from all sides, he withdraws his senses from the sense objects, his wisdom becomes steady.
It perfectly illustrates the yogic concept of pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses.
What I love about it is the mechanics of autonomy. Notice what the text doesn't say. It doesn't say the tortoise amputates its limbs.
Right. Doesn't permanently blind itself or deafen itself to avoid the world.
A tortoise uses its limbs to walk, to eat, to explore the terrain. It engages with the environment. But the microsecond the environment becomes hostile or toxic, the tortoise has the autonomous muscular control to pull those limbs back into the impenetrable safety of its shell.
That's exactly it. It is about total mastery over your attentional bandwidth. For the average person, the senses are like wild horses dragging a chariot. Wherever the object goes, the eyes and the mind are forced to follow.
If there is an outrage-inducing news headline, the average mind is dragged into anger.
If there is a tantalizing advertisement, the mind is dragged into craving. But the Stitaprajna is the master of the chariot.
They can deploy your senses to perform karma yoga, to build, to write, to speak, to engage fully with humanity.
But they maintain the absolute sovereign ability to retract their attention into the self the moment those interactions threaten their internal peace.
But the Gita makes a very subtle and terrifying point here about the difference between physical withdrawal and psychological freedom.
Yes, the concept of rasa.
It talks about a person who forces themselves to fast or physically restrains themselves from objects. It says the objects might fall away from them, but the rasa, the subtle taste, the deep-seated longing for the objects, remains in the mind.
This is a profound critique of superficial asceticism. You can lock a drug addict in a padded room. You have physically removed the sense object. They are no longer engaging with the drug.
But are they liberated?
No, their mind is still screaming for it. The rasa, the subtle flavor of the desire, is still tormenting them. True liberation, the text says, only happens when even that subtle taste vanishes.
And how does that subtle taste vanish?
The verse continues, even the taste falls away when the supreme is realized. You cannot white-knuckle your way to enlightenment.
Willpower eventually breaks.
It always does. The only way to permanently lose the taste for the muddy puddle of worldly, ego-driven desires is to finally taste the pure, infinite spring water of the Atman.
Oh, wow.
Once you experience the supreme, unconditioned bliss of your true nature, the finite, conditional pleasures of the world simply lose their psychological grip on you. You don't have to force yourself to detach from them. They just fall away, like toys from the hands of a child who's grown up.
That is an incredible visual, and it perfectly sets up the final magnificent metaphor Krishna uses in this chapter to describe the state of the enlightened mind.
The ocean metaphor.
Yes. He compares the mind to the ocean. He says that rivers are constantly flowing into the ocean from all sides, continuously dumping water into it. But the ocean is so vast, so incredibly deep that it does not overflow.
It remains utterly unmoved, retaining its fundamental stillness.
It is the perfect synthesis of everything Chapter 2 teaches. The rivers are the sensory inputs, the dualities of life, the inevitable events of the world.
The rivers of tragedy, the rivers of joy, the rivers of success and failure, they never stop flowing.
You cannot stop the world from throwing things at you.
You can't amputate the tortoise limbs permanently.
Exactly. The goal of the Gita is not to create a numb, isolated hermit who feels nothing. The goal is to expand your internal capacity so massively that you become the ocean.
For a puddle, a single rock thrown into it creates chaos and displaces the water.
If your identity is tied to your fragile ego, a single insult or a single failure destroys your day.
But if your identity is rooted in the infinite Atman, the inputs still come, the challenges still arrive. But because your depth is limitless, you absorb them without overflowing. You remain fundamentally undisturbed.
Wow. Let's step back and look at the colossal architecture we've explored today. This isn't just a philosophical debate. It's a complete operating system for human consciousness.
It really is a masterclass.
We started in the chariot with Arjuna, paralyzed by a panic attack because he was superimposing the temporary roles of his family onto the eternal reality of the soul. He was crushed by the illusion of his own agency and the terror of outcome.
And Krishna performed the ultimate epistemological intervention. He shattered the illusion by revealing the Sankhya perspective, the knowledge that the true self, the observer, is unborn, indestructible, and entirely immune to the 6 modifications of matter.
But he didn't stop at pure philosophy. He brought it down into the mud with Karma Yoga. He taught us the mechanics of Nishkama Karma.
How to act with ferocious intensity and excellence in the present moment, precisely by severing our psychological attachment to the future outcome.
We mapped how dropping the demand for the fruit of our actions shuts down anxiety, initiates flow state, and purifies the mind.
We also looked at the stark warning of the ladder of the fall. We traced the precise neurological and psychological cascade from merely glancing at a sense object to the dopamine prediction error of desire.
The cortisol spike of anger when obstructed and the ultimate destruction of the intellect.
And finally, we looked at the behavioral model of the Stitaprajna, the mastery of the tortoise, able to engage and withdraw at will.
And the vastness of the ocean, absorbing the rivers of human experience without ever losing its fundamental, unshakable peace.
Shankaracharya's commentary reminds us at every step that this is not about acquiring new things. It is about removing the ignorance that obscures what is already there. The peace of the Atman is your baseline reality. You are just distracted by the rivers.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final practical thought experiment to apply this ancient technology to your life today.
I love a good thought experiment.
Think about the single biggest source of stress or anxiety you are dealing with right now. It could be a project at work, a financial issue, or a conflict in a relationship. Bring it clearly to mind.
Got it.
Now, I want you to brutally separate the action from the outcome. Are you actually suffering because of the physical steps you have to take today? Or are you suffering because your ego is desperately demanding a specific future outcome from the universe?
That's a profound question.
What would happen to your physiology right now if you fully embraced Nishkama Karma? What if you committed to doing the absolute best work possible today, but you mentally surrendered your right to dictate the result? If you let go of the fruit, how much bandwidth would you get back?
True wisdom is to act with detachment, knowing the self is eternal.
Exactly. True wisdom is to act with profound dedication, while grounded in the unshakable knowledge that your true self is completely untouched by the success or failure of the costume you happen to be wearing.
Such a powerful takeaway.
That is the challenge and the ultimate liberation of Chapter 2. Reminding you all once again, if you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like the video, and drop your thoughts on that final provocative question into the comments. Next time on Simplified Awakening, we are going to continue our deep dive into the Gita with Chapter 3, Karma Yoga,
where we explore exactly how to master the art of action.
Yes, we will dissect how to act in the messy, demanding reality of daily life without accumulating the psychological baggage that weighs us down. You won't want to miss it. Until then, keep diving deep.